This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Welcome to the Monday Mashup. Wow, just an amazing number of things to talk about today. Seems like everything. First of all, college football is back in a big bad way. And let's all be absolutely ecstatic about that. Second of all, before we get this thing rolling, I'm doing it on my own tonight. Tanner had some other obligations. He couldn't join us. Unfortunately, right now, the Michigan-Notre Dame game ended about 20 minutes ago. So you're going to get my immediate reaction to that. I have a lot to say about what Michigan State put on the field against Utah State last night. The reason I'm recording this right now is because I am taking the dreaded quest, the ultimate horror. And as I spoke on the podcast a couple weeks ago, this Labor Day weekend, I'm going up north. And now, as much as I say I'm taking the dreaded quest and, the big trek, the adventure, I'm not going the full 4 hours. I'm not going to Mackinac. I'm not going to Traverse City. I'm going to Algonac, which, if you ask me, that is the best way to spend a weekend. But before we get to all of this, and I will talk about all of this, including what the Bears went out and did this morning. And I do, despite Tanner not being here, I do have his picks. We have to finish up the NFL preview because next week it kicks off. And we will get to all of that. But first, I have to tell you about what powers this podcast, what lets us do this. It's The Athletic. It's premium sports content for the fans. It's got amazing writers. It's got amazing stories, amazing articles, and honestly, it seems like everyone in sports media is getting a job there lately. If you worked at ESPN at one point, you probably have an offer from The Athletic. If you worked at Fox Sports at one point, you probably have an offer from The Athletic. And the reason why? Because they're pushing more content than ever out for the best, the biggest sports in the world, and I do mean the world. It's not strict to football. It's not strict to baseball, to hockey, or to basketball. They've got Premier League coverage, too. If you're a soccer guy, check out The Athletic. It's the place to be. And guess what? Detroit Sports Podcast is hooking you up. Go to theathletic.com/DSP, and you're going to get a 30% discount on your subscription to The Athletic. A 30% deal on us, because we're such nice people. We're going to give you 30% off your subscription to The Athletic, and I promise you, I read it. It's what gets me my wonderful takes that I'm going to deliver you all show today. Go visit The Athletic, man. Theathletic.com/DSP. If you're a sports fan, that's where you want to be. Theathletic.com/DSP. We're giving you 30% off. Check it out. It's what lets me talk to you guys. And that's what I want to do now. And I do want to start very simply with my immediate reaction to what just went down in South Bend, Indiana. And I'm going to say it plain and simple. I'm going to put it all out there. This loss, this 24-17 loss for Michigan, and really when you consider that one of the touchdowns could have been considered garbage time, 24-10, and then you add in the fact that one of them was a special teams kick return, it took 3.5 quarters of football to score a touchdown. By the way, it's been upwards of 180 minutes of football since Michigan scored a passing touchdown. Yeah. Now, this loss falls entirely on Jim Harbaugh. And I know what you're thinking. Shea, how can you say that? How can you say that when you saw the way the offensive line performed? Horribly. When you saw what Shea Patterson looked like against a top 30 FBS defense. Oh, you mean exactly how he's looked against every top 30 FBS defense he's ever played. He went out there, and if you just look at completion percentage, which is an overrated stat, and you just look at yards, he had a nice game. 60%, 63%, whatever it was, 66%. He was 20 of 30. Excuse my math. 227 yards. It's not a bad outing. But then you got to factor in he threw a pick, and it was not pretty at all. He lost a critical fumble on the last drive of the game, where Michigan had an opportunity to go down the field and drive the game, to tie the game, where Shea Patterson had an opportunity to show himself off as the quarterback of the future in Ann Arbor, where Shea Patterson had an opportunity to do something that's almost Tom Brady-esque, in Tom Brady's colors, and he could have driven the Wolverines down the field in South Bend and tied the game. And instead, he rolled out right, straight into a big hit, and he lost a fumble on the critical drive of the game. That's not to mention mistakes that he made earlier in the game. And no, I don't want to make this a Shea Patterson sucks podcast, because I don't believe that. Shea Patterson, in flashes, showed what he can do, in particular on the touchdown drive that made the score 24-17. Shea Patterson showed brilliance. At one point, Shea Patterson rolled out right. He took command of the offense in the play, directed traffic, opened up a wide receiver, made a dime of a throw, and completed a critical first down pass that would lead to a rushing touchdown. It was an incredible play. There's no other way to say it. Shea Patterson made a great play. But do you know what happened on that play? The coaches weren't in his ear. The coaches weren't commanding it. And that's where this loss falls entirely on Jim Harbaugh and Pep Hamilton and whoever else is involved in calling plays for that offense. It was the most vanilla play design I have ever seen. And I'm a Michigan State fan. I know vanilla play design. I've had to deal with Dave Warner and Jim Bowman doing the same short side, half-back toss, half-back stretch, jet sweep for years. I've watched Dave Warner and Jim Bowman run speed options with the likes of Connor Cook and now Brian Lewerke, and I will get to that. I have seen vanilla play calling. I have seen a lack of desire to adapt and to change and go with what works. As a Michigan State fan, I have seen it. And you know what? I thank every god, goddess, whatever deity exists in the universe, I thank them that Pep Hamilton is not in charge of play calling in East Lansing. How do you pay that guy $1 million? Seriously, how many passes were behind the line of scrimmage for the Wolverines? It seemed like all of them. You're telling me all offseason I had to hear about this dynamic quarterback that's going to come in and open up the playbook. I have to hear about this Shea Patterson guy who's going to come in and he's looking great. We're doing a lot with the spread offense. We're really opening up the playbook. Also that none of it happens. Halfback dives to Karan Higdon. Over. Dive. You're running wide receiver screens in the dumbest situations. You're doing nothing creative at all. You're calling the safest plays I've ever seen with one of the most dynamic quarterbacks in college football in your backfield. Yes, Michigan fans, it's time. Start calling your coach. It's abysmal, and it's embarrassing. You allowed a defense that's supposed to be the best in the country to go out there for a first half against Notre Dame and look completely lackadaisical. Lost. And Don Brown, who I believe is the best defensive coordinator in America, in the second half of that football game, tightened up every loose valve in that defense and got them to play extremely well. And it didn't matter. Because Jim Harbaugh continues to allow Pep Hamilton and others in this coaching staff to call awful plays. Hold your coach accountable. It's time. Jim Harbaugh cannot continue to allow this to happen. Jim Harbaugh cannot hire Ed Warner for whatever ungodly amount of money Ed Warner is being paid to have an offensive line go out there and look like soup. It's time to turn on your coach. I've said it for a while. I never bought the Shea Patterson hype. Never. And you know why? Because I looked at the numbers and I watched the games. He's shown flashes of brilliance. Do you know what held him back at Ole Miss? A bad offensive line. And yeah, they had an All-American left tackle, which, by the way, Michigan certainly does not have, because left tackle might be the worst position on their football team. But he had a bad offensive line at Ole Miss. It's part of why he missed so many games for injury. And it's part of why he looked so bad against good defenses. And tonight was no different. So, Michigan fan, I say this to you. I speak now directly to you. If you have any respect for your program, for what that logo and those colors stand for, you will hold your coach and his feet to the flames. Because guess what? You are now 1-6 in rivalry games under Jim Harbaugh. And you can place the blame firmly on him. You want to tell me about, trouble with the snap and what a miracle it was. Yeah, you're not wrong. But Jim Harbaugh effectively lowered his threshold for what makes a mistake major. When he decided to put gunners out with a return team that had no returner, a 10-man rush, when he had 3 men on the offensive line of a punt disengage from their blocks and go downfield, he chose what would make a mistake major. If he had enough blockers, maybe the punt gets off. And maybe it doesn't. And maybe we never know. But I do know this. It was not the right call by Harbaugh then. The same way in 2016 when you waltz into Ohio State with all the swagger in the world off a loss against Iowa. And you look really, really good. Except for Jim Harbaugh is allowing long-developing play-action passes to be called on 3rd and long from the shadow of your own end zone that result in pick sixes. Where do you put the blame? Last year against Michigan State, you want to talk about the rain, fine. It was 14-3 State before the rain started coming down. But as much as you want to talk about the rain, why is Jim Harbaugh allowing Pep Hamilton to call 5 wide in a monsoon for John O'Korn? Michigan fan, hold your coach accountable, because now you lost at Notre Dame. You've now lost at Notre Dame to open the 2018 season, a season in which I've said for a while this game sets the tone, and you lost. And not only did you lose, you scored 10 total points on offense. 10. Yeah, you're lucky you had a miracle kick return on special teams, one of the few areas that has been absolutely excellent under Harbaugh, sans trouble with the snap. Oh, yeah, and again, trouble with the snap tonight on a missed field goal. Hold your coach accountable. You haven't had a passing touchdown in the better part of 3 games. The last time you threw a passing touchdown was a 2-yard pass from John O'Korn in 14 minutes and 57 seconds left against Ohio State last season. That was the last passing touchdown that Michigan had. Don't give me the Shea Patterson hype anymore. We just saw Shea Patterson. In fact, in limited exposure, Dylan McCaffrey looked as good or better. I don't want to hear about Shea Patterson anymore. I don't want to hear about Jim Harbaugh anymore. Hey, Colin Cowherd. Hey, does Jim Harbaugh's resume still stack up to Nick Saban's? You imbecile for putting that take out. Hey, Skip Bayless, is Michigan 1 loss in 1 game still your national champion? The same Michigan that hasn't won a road game against a ranked opponent in 17 tries? That's your national champion? Yeah, you can pick that if you want, but it couldn't be me. And I know, everyone's thinking, well, Shea, you can have all these incredibly hard takes on Michigan all you want, but what do you think about Michigan State? And I'll tell you what I just said about play calling. When Michigan State goes up against Utah State, you have home field. You're under the lights on a Friday night with a sold-out stadium. Blow them out. Get creative with the play calling and blow them out. And look, as much as I want to get on here and say the defense looked horrible, as much as I want to get on here and say they got gashed, it was week 1 against a gimmicky, no-huddle offense. I'm not going to kill them. I've seen teams go against this many a time. It's why anytime you play a service academy that specializes in triple options, you get a little nervous, even though you know they aren't nearly as talented as you. If you're Michigan, last year against Air Force, or if you're Michigan State, whatever school you are, if you go against a service academy, you know that triple option's threatening because it's gimmicky, because you don't see it often. And that's what happened with Utah State. And I don't want to hold them to the fire. Do they have to tighten things up on the defensive side of the ball before they go to Tempe next week? Absolutely. Do they have as many problems as Michigan has right now? Absolutely not. And I'll tell you why. Take the pick six away. Brian Lewerke played an incredibly good game. Incredibly good. He completed 70% of his passes. He threw for damn near 300 yards. And he threw for 2 touchdowns. What more do you want from the kid? Do I want the pick six to stop? Duh. Who wouldn't? Do I want the play calling to open up a little bit? Do I want the offensive coordinators to get a little bit more creative? Yes, but at this point, I can't ask for miracles. D'Antonio has had Dave Warner and Jim Bowman calling plays for how long? I got to settle for it. I mean, it is what it is. Do I think that D'Antonio should, show a little bit of heartlessness and let his friends go? Yes, I do, if I'm being honest. I don't think Nick Saban has won 7 national titles by having his best friends in the room with him. No, I don't. And you're a school that has as many elite wins in the last 5 years as Alabama. So go out and show me. If Jim Bowman and Dave Warner were so good, why aren't they getting coaching offers every offseason? Maybe it's time to get some new coordinators in and open up the playbook. And I know what you're thinking probably. Well, they scored 38 points. How can you be upset with the offense? Because I saw offensive coordinators call the most vanilla plays I've ever seen. Aside from Michigan versus Notre Dame tonight. On the game-winning touchdown, they called a speed option 3 times in a row. If you're going up against a real defense, a non-Utah State defense, like, I don't know, Michigan or Ohio State or Penn State, 3 speed options in a row from the 10 is not getting you in the end zone. You want to go up against Wisconsin and Indy? Assuming we get there, you want to run 3 speed options in a row against Wisconsin in Indy for a Big Ten championship? It's not going to work. No, I don't have a ton of nice things to say about Michigan State other than this. Felton Davis had an incredible game. Brian Lewerke made great throws, and they probably have the best receiving core in the Big Ten. But if the play calling holds it all back, it will not matter because Ohio State's going out and hanging 80 points on Pac-12 teams. Ohio State is the only Big Ten team this weekend that looked like they gave any type of damn against the opponent they were playing. Michigan, completely unprepared, and that's why it falls on Harbaugh. You can't let your team go into a rivalry game in South Bend with 0 preparation, the way that Harbaugh did. If you're Mark D'Antonio, you're playing at home on a Friday night to open the year against Utah State, favored by 24 points, you cannot allow your team to look like that. And I know Michigan State never blows anybody out. But maybe it's time that we start figuring out how to do it, because I don't want to have to beat Western Michigan by 7 in a season that I go to the playoff. So yeah, I think there's reason to be concerned about our football teams as far as college goes. And if you want to go NFL, which we have to, yeah, there's definitely reason to be concerned about the Lions. I'll tell you what, and this is where Lions talk needs to start. And it starts with the Chicago Bears. Because the Chicago Bears let their nuts just drop on the table. And they traded 2 first-round picks for Khalil Mack. 2 firsts and a third for Khalil Mack. And they get back one of the best edge rushers in the history of the NFL. And a second-round pick. And you look at the other organizations in the NFC North. And you look at the Vikings, who just went out and gave Kirk Cousins $86 million for 3 years. You look at the Packers, who, for the better part of the last quarter century, have had 2 of the best quarterbacks who have ever played the game of football. Then you look at the Lions. We had maybe arguably the best running back in NFL history, and we have 1 playoff win to show for it. The Bears are out here playing chess, getting Khalil Mack and adding him to a defense that a lot of people disrespected over the past few years. I believe top 10 in total defense last season. Certainly a very good pass defense. Certainly a very good rush defense. And they're only adding to that by adding, again, one of the most dominant edge rushers we have ever seen in Khalil Mack. Oh, and by the way, they signed him for 6 years because they aren't cowards with their wallets the way that Oakland is. I mean, you look at the Lions and you just have to wonder, what the hell is the front office doing? You know, Bob Quinn, yeah, he comes in and everybody goes, well, he's been with the Patriots. And I've always had the question of, look, when you look at the Patriots, the general manager is basically Belichick. So how do we know what this guy's track record is? So Bob Quinn comes in, and so far, not good results. You know, you have a head coach in Matt Patricia who goes out and talks about it's a process. I mean, he said the words, process. You don't get to do that. You don't get to take over a team with a franchise quarterback, decent wide receivers. You add an offensive line and a running back, and then you go, it's a process. We're building. No, you went 9-7 last year, and you're taking this team over, and they have one of the 10 to 5 best quarterbacks in football. Excuse me if I hold my expectations a little higher, but you don't get to come in here and call it a process. We aren't the 76ers. We aren't coming off a record loss season. We're not the Browns. Yeah, I have very large concerns about the Lions at this point. And I picked them to win the division, and that's a pick that I'm dying on that hill. And I'll tell you why. Because as good as Aaron Rodgers is, he's clearly upset with his receivers based on an interview he gave a couple weeks ago. He has an organization that's never been able to figure out how to build a defense. And maybe that's why they only have 2 championships to show for a quarter century with 2 of the best quarterbacks in the history of the game. I don't think the Packers as a whole are a great football team. They have a great quarterback. That's about it. Jimmy Graham is a fossil. Devontae Adams and Randall Cobb are not getting big wide receiver money. He doesn't have weapons. He doesn't have a running game. He doesn't have a defense. These are things you need to win. You look at the Bears, as good as they've gotten, as good as adding Khalil Mack makes them, as much as they went out and addressed their receiving core issues, Mitch Trubisky is a second-year quarterback who last year was on the tightest leash I've ever seen. I have questions. And then you look at Minnesota, and yeah, you got Kirk Cousins. You have a decent receiving core. You have a very good defense. But yeah, okay, this is the first time we've seen Kirk Cousins with true NFL help. But all we've seen Kirk Cousins do is fail to win big games. And that's what it comes down to when we're talking about the NFL. Win big games. And that's why I look to the Lions and I go, look, you have the second best quarterback in the division. You have a defense that's being ran now by a guy who has put out top 10 to top 5 to top 1 scoring defenses with the Patriots with limited talent. And he went and drafted in favor of your glaring weaknesses in offensive line and in running back. And I have a lot of hope. But this preseason, they've looked lost. And Patricia has looked lost. And I don't want to put the cart in front of the horse and say it's all over because of the preseason. I don't think that's true. But I think necessary concerns are being raised. And I will say this as well. Matt Patricia is on a very short leash. You don't get to take over a franchise with a franchise quarterback and not win. You don't get to. Not in the NFL. Don't work like that. This is the highest stage of football, and you have the highest position possible in a coaching staff. You don't get to come to a team with a franchise quarterback coming off a 9-7 season and talk about a process. You have to win now. If you don't make the playoffs year 1, your seat's on fire year 2. I mean, that's just the way it is. It's the league. You can disagree with it, whatever, but that's the way it is. All right, so I've given you my take on Michigan. I think Jim Harbaugh, on a scale of 1 to call the fire department, his chair is, we're at about a 7 for heat index on Jim Harbaugh's chair. Because at this point, he has to effectively win out for any hope of making the college football playoff. You have to beat Michigan State on the road. By the way, you haven't beaten a ranked team on the road in 12 years and 17 attempts. And then you have to beat Ohio State on the road. Jim Harbaugh's seat is as hot as it has ever been. And this is what I've talked a lot on the podcast about, the tone-setting aspect of this game against Notre Dame. Michigan's in a pressure cooker for the rest of the season. And this game set that tone. You have zero margin for error now. If you went and beat Notre Dame, you get the monkey off your back for the no wins against ranked opponents on the road. You get that monkey off your back. All of a sudden, you're sitting pretty. 1-0. You're the only Big Ten team with a win over a ranked opponent. You're looking great. Rolling back home to Ann Arbor for a few cupcake non-conference games before you head into the conference schedule. And you can still lose a game. Now, you're in a pressure cooker for the remainder of the season. If Harbaugh doesn't win out, doesn't make a trip to Indy, there's no way that his seat isn't absolutely engulfed in flames next season. No way. Zero chance. It's his only option. He has to beat both Michigan State and Ohio State. And to be honest with you, there is not a universe where I see that happening after what I saw tonight. But I digress. Michigan fans, I'm not here just to stomp on your heart. I'm not here just to talk about the fact that Michigan State is 1-0 while Michigan is 0-1. I'm here to finish out the NFL preview. And whether I have Tanner or not, we're going to get this thing done. Because fortunately, I have his picks. So I'm going to go through the two divisions that we have left to cover in our NFL preview. And I'm going to give you our winners for those. And I'm going to give you an MVP, and we're going to give you Super Bowl picks. And both of us have our picks in. Tanner has sent them to me so I can relay them because we do want to know at the end of the season what he thought. So we need it on record. And I got mine as well. So the two divisions that we have left are the NFC West and the AFC East. And we're also going to pick MVP and the Super Bowl. So for the NFC West, and this isn't going to be the same kind of system that we've run through where we've given our takes. I'm just going to give you really quick kind of just a breakdown of the division, where I think the division's at, and then who I think is going to win it. And then I'm going to go through the Super Bowl. I'm going to go through the MVP picks, and we'll get through all of that, and we'll call it a day. And that's kind of where the rest of the show is going to go. So for the NFC West, I want to start off by saying, as much as I think the Rams are on paper the best team in the division, I have a little bit of a question, because how many times, and it's really, from a football standpoint, if I'm an NFL center and I have to line up against the Rams defensive line with two tackles by the names of Aaron Donald and Ndamukong Suh, I'm pissing myself if I'm an NFL center. I don't want to do that at all. You're telling me I got to line up in between two of the best interior rushers who have ever lived? No, I'm good. I'm good. And so as much as I think the Rams have on paper this amount of talent, I look at them and I go, super teams in the NFL. You remember when the Eagles were a super team and they won, 6 games? You get that amount of talent and that amount of personality. Things don't always mesh really nicely. But that's where you have to look at the rest of the division, too. The Eagles played in the NFC East in a time where the NFC East was very good, where the Giants were going to Super Bowls, and the Redskins and the Cowboys were competitive teams. And now you look at the NFC East, and it's a wasteland where the Eagles are far and away the favorite, and everybody else is kind of eh. But that's where I look at the rest of the NFC West, besides the Rams. Arizona, you're starting Sam Bradford. No, you're out. You look at San Francisco, I think they're doing everything very much the right way. I think Jimmy Garoppolo is potentially a good to great NFL quarterback. But it's too early for me to go, yes, this team can win and go to the playoffs and win the division. It's too early. I think they still have holes to be filled on defense. They have holes to be filled on offense. They have the pieces in place, but I think they're a draft away. And you look at Seattle. Seattle's got to be the most scared team in the NFL. Seattle's got to play the Rams twice. Seattle has never had an offensive line. And now they have to go up against a defensive line that has Ndamukong Suh and Aaron Donald lining up in the middle next to each other. Yeah, Russell Wilson is scared out of his mind. We are going to see the vintage Russell Wilson 20 yards behind the line of scrimmage, turning around 4 or 5 times before throwing the ball away when we look at the Rams versus the Seahawks. So as much as I'm like out on the Rams because I don't love super teams, I am out on them going to the Super Bowl, but the rest of the division is so just mediocre to bad, I can't not pick them. And Tanner was very much the same. Tanner said the Rams 10-6. He said the same thing. He loves what they've done on paper, but again, super teams don't always pan out. There's a level of nervousness. They don't have a super easy schedule. Jared Goff needs to go out and prove who he is, as does Todd Gurley, and that's why Tanner has the Rams at 10-6. They're going to win the division. But again, this is a division that 10 wins probably does the trick. And then we move on to the AFC North, where I got to go with the easy pick for me. I look at the Ravens, and I've never liked Joe Flacco. And now with the changed pass interference rule, that's going to affect Joe Flacco for sure. And I've never loved Joe Flacco. I don't think he's elite, and that's always kind of been the question, right? Joe Flacco elite ? No. I don't think he has an elite core of wide receivers. I don't think there's a great running game there. I don't think the defense is the way that it has been in past years for the Ravens. So I don't love the prospect of Baltimore. You look at Pittsburgh. They have all the weapons in the world, right? Antonio Brown, Juju Smith-Schuster, Le'Veon Bell, a very nice offensive line, a good-ish defense. You look at Pittsburgh, they are the safe pick because Cincinnati with Marvin Lewis and Andy Dalton is such a dumpster fire of an organization right now. And you look at the Cleveland Browns, and as much as they are on the up and up, they're a year away at least. I mean, I think Baker Mayfield could be one of the great quarterbacks in the history of this league. I think he has that ceiling. I think he has that level of competitiveness that could drive him to being that good of a quarterback. But it's not going to be this year. And Tyrod Taylor, as much as he's been excellent in ball security, he's not a guy that I would count on to go down the field in the final 2 minutes of a game. And that's why I look to Pittsburgh. Because they have a quarterback who, even though he may not be elite anymore, he was at one point one of the best quarterbacks the league has seen in Ben Roethlisberger. You have one of the best wide receivers the league has ever seen in Antonio Brown. You have weapons in Juju Smith-Schuster, a transcendent running back in Le'Veon Bell, a defense that's good enough. And that's why I think the Steelers win this division. Now, Tanner has a different pick. Tanner is in on the quarterback I don't like. Tanner is in on the Ravens at 11-5, on the back of their defense, on the back of John Harbaugh as their head coach, maybe a little Lamar Jackson action thrown in there, just mixed in a little bit. And the Ravens, he has them winning the division at 11-5. He also has the Steelers as a wild card at 10-6. Now, MVP, this is a very tough one for me to pick, and I'm going with the defending champ. I'm going with the guy who currently wears the belt. And I know he's 41 years old. Can he really sustain the level of play that he's had? Well, did you see his preseason? I mean, every time he goes out and every time that we all have this same talk, Tom Brady's ready to fall off a cliff. He goes out and shows once again why he's a man on a mission every season. He just wants it more than anyone else. He just wants it that much. And for the first time since, I don't know, pre-2007, he's going to be throwing to corpses. You know, Julian Edelman is missing the first 4 games of the season. Chris Hogan will be his number 1 wide receiver. Yeah, there's Rob Gronkowski, but when there aren't any receivers to defend outside, defenses can adjust for Gronk over the middle. I know he's a freak of nature, but there's only so much you can do when you're in double to triple coverage every single play. But the ability for Tom Brady that he's had throughout his career to seek out the open man, whether it be in the backfield for a runner, whether it be a short dink and dunk style pass, the ability that Tom Brady has shown to dissect the defense and find the open man and throw whoever he's throwing to, whether it's David Patton and David Givens or Deion Branch or Randy Moss or Wes Welker or Julian Edelman and Rob Gronkowski, whoever it may be, Brandon Cooks. Brady has always shown an innate ability to not only dissect defenses, but to get the ball out quickly and find the open man. And in his preseason, he showed no signs of age. I think Brady goes out there and he shows that the GOAT does what the GOAT do. And he goes out and he wins the MVP. Now, Tanner has a different MVP, and it's one that I actually think is an incredibly interesting pick and a little bit saucy. Because I'm pretty sure he did not pick this team to win the division. I think for the NFC East, he picked the Giants. And I'm sure everyone's wondering who's picking for MVP out of the NFC East, Carson Wentz? No. Tanner picked Ezekiel Elliott. And I think this is an incredibly spicy pick. Because you look at Dak Prescott's numbers with Zeke in the lineup. Excellent. And you look at Zeke's numbers when he gets on the field. Excellent. Dude is a transcendent running back. He's the Le'Veon Bell type, where we have to stop looking at running back and paying guys based on position, where we have to look and go, these guys are changing offenses. And that's how I view Zeke Elliott. And that's why I think it's a great pick by Tanner to say that this guy's going to be the MVP, because honestly, he comes out, the Cowboys make the playoffs with Zeke Elliott in the backfield. It's going to be hard to look away from that. It's going to be hard to look away from that because of what we saw them do without him a season ago. And also, their receivers, no one in America could name. No one. The average guy on the street doesn't know Cole Beasley from an insurance salesman. No one can name him. They might say Dez Bryant, but he's not on the team. So I think it's a great pick by Tanner to say Zeke Elliott has that opportunity to go out and be the MVP, because I think that the offense rides on his back. And so now, what's the Super Bowl look like? I'm going to give you Tanner's pick first. Tanner says it's going to be Patriots-Giants round 3. Now, I'm a little hesitant when he says Giants, because a year ago, they were abysmal. But that's what we've seen in the NFL recently. No one saw the Eagles coming. No one saw the Vikings coming. No one saw the Jags coming. The Giants have a rookie running back who could be Zeke Elliott, who could be Le'Veon Bell. They have a quarterback who's been there before. And they have a receiver who is one of the 3 best in the NFL. And they have Sterling Shepard. And they have a defense that I think is very good if it's not being asked to be on the field for damn near 40 minutes a game. I don't think it's a horrible pick. I don't think they win the division, but I think they could get in as a wild card and do what they've done in their past Super Bowl runs and make a run. Now, the difference is Tanner thinks the Patriots win. And Tom Brady finally gets his revenge, and he gets his 6th ring, and he rides off into the sunset. And this is where Tanner and I happen to share an opinion. Because I also think Tom Brady gets number 6, and he rides off into the sunset, but I think he does it over a different team, the New Orleans Saints. How many seasons have we gone where it's almost been Brady versus Rodgers in the Super Bowl, or almost been, like last year, Brady versus Breeze? How many seasons have we gone where we've just missed that marquee quarterback matchup? We had Peyton Manning and Russell Wilson. We had Peyton Manning and Cam Newton, but it wasn't all-time great versus all-time great. And this year, I think it finally happens. The Saints showed so much growth defensively last year than a season before that, and I think it just continues when you have guys like Marshawn Lattimore anchoring that defense. And then you have Drew Brees with an incredible backfield. And I know Mark Ingram's out to start the year, but Alvin Kamara showed incredible poise and talent coming out of that Saints backfield last year. You look at when Mark Ingram comes back, this team is going to be excellent out of the backfield. And it's given Drew Brees kind of that weapon he hasn't always had. Not to mention, he's got Michael Thomas to hit on the outside. I think the Saints are an incredibly good football team, and I think Drew Brees takes them back to the Super Bowl. And I do think that Tom Brady and Bill Belichick get their 6th, and they call it quits. What more could Tom Brady need after 6 Super Bowls? He will have matched the most Super Bowls by an NFL franchise by himself. And I don't know, maybe he's psychotic enough, and I do think he's psychotic And maybe he's psychotic enough that he comes back a year later and goes, I want 7. And it would be astounding to see if a 42-year-old Tom Brady goes out and plays for a 7th Super Bowl ring. But I do think he gets number 6 this year. And I think it's the end of the dynasty. I think it's the end of the era. You know, I've said I have problems with Jacksonville. And I think the AFC ultimately is the weaker conference. And that will allow Brady to get there relatively unscathed. And the more rested team will win the Super Bowl. And that will be the Patriots because I think they have the path of least resistance. That's all I got for you on the Monday Mashup. I am, of course, your host, Shea Norling. Follow me on Twitter if you like, at NorlingShea, NorlingShea. That's at NorlingShea. And don't forget, The Athletic, premium sports content, and we're giving you 30% off. All you got to do is go to theathletic.com/DSP and collect your discount on us. We're here to help. We're here to make sure that you are as informed a fan as we are. Thanks for listening. This was the Monday Mashup.